Well, it's been more than 2 weeks since a devastating earthquake struck Myanmar and Thailand, killing more than 3,600 people. But the quake-ravaged region is still experiencing powerful aftershocks as relief efforts continue in the worst affected areas. Let's get more on what's happening on the ground. And I'm joined by Titon Mitram, the UNDP's resident representative for Myanmar. Titon, thank you so much for your time today. Now, the central Myanmar was hit by a 5.5 magnitude quake yesterday morning. Do we know what's happening on the ground in that area?
Indeed, there was an aftershock yesterday where it was quite severe. So a lot of the buildings which were sort of precarious in the sense that they were semi-damaged have now collapsed. The devastation has been huge, as you've mentioned. We're estimating probably about 80% of the buildings across Sagaing, Monway, Mandalay, and the surrounding areas have been severely damaged. The conditions are quite dire. 70,000 people or so are now living on the streets, and the reason is that they're extremely scared to go back into their homes. Each of the homes have got significant damage, and those that are displaced now are in open spaces. As you know, there's been some heavy rainfall. We have situations where hospitals can no longer house the patients because of concerns about the integrity of the buildings. They're out in the car parks in 40-degree heat. Our own remote sensing of the entire earthquake zone would indicate something like 1.6 million buildings have been exposed to the earthquake, and perhaps 10,000 houses and public service buildings are severely damaged. And we can see that there's no adequate water supply. Sanitation is a real problem as people are defecating out in open spaces. So the combination of a lack of water and lack of adequate sanitation means waterborne diseases now are rife through the communities. The markets themselves are no longer functioning, and all the market linkages through the roads and bridges have been severely damaged. And the unfortunate part of this is that the earthquake has hit a country that's already suffered 4 years of civil war. And if you can imagine, nearly double the population of Australia are living on 50 cents a day. So they really don't have any resilience to devastating shocks like this.
Yes, and how difficult is it, not just for the victims that are there who don't have a roof over their heads, but also for aid workers and those who are helping with the relief efforts in the face of hundreds of aftershocks that have been occurring since that quake 2 weeks ago?
Usually managing for aftershocks is not that much of a problem because the distributions are done in open spaces. So far, the roads that have been used to get the relief supplies into those areas have not been affected by the aftershocks. So for now, the distributions are going apace. And we would hope that the aftershocks will diminish over time. The biggest impact of the aftershocks is a psychological impact on the people. As you can imagine, no one is feeling comfortable being under a building when you look around you and you see so much devastation of the collapsed buildings around you.
Yes, and you spoke earlier of the lack of so many basic amenities, water, for instance, medical care. Do you think the humanitarian assistance is keeping up with the pace of what is required to help those that are worst affected?
No, not at all. In the sense that if, as I mentioned, the problem is that we're looking at a population that was already devastated because of the conflict. On top of this comes an earthquake. If you look at the international response to the ongoing civil war, it's been quite mild. To be quite honest. So only 5% of the needs that have been identified by UN agencies and international NGOs and national NGOs have been met. So the resources just aren't enough to meet what is now an additional crisis on top of an existing crisis.
Yes, and can you give us a sense of how this long-running civil war is hampering efforts to reach those who are in need?
Fortunately, both the opposition to the military and the military had announced independently their own ceasefires. But at this point in time, It's not clear whether those ceasefires will be sufficient to allow assistance to get to all of the areas that are affected. A good 1/3 of the population that was impacted by the earthquake are in areas not controlled by the military. The UN, including the Special Envoy Julie Bishop, the former Foreign Minister for Australia, is advocating very, very strongly to use the ceasefire as a way of providing unimpaired access. And we hope the military will allow that because the people really need to be reached and quite urgently.
Yes, and speaking of the urgency that's there, Titon, what's required right now at this stage of the relief efforts?
So the hospitals, as I mentioned, are absolutely overwhelmed. In any case, before the earthquake, a lot of the hospital staff had resigned because of the civil disobedience movement. There wasn't sufficient budget by the military authorities to keep the hospitals functioning. There wasn't adequate medicine. So support to the hospitals, both in staff and medical resources, is really critical. Water, purified water, is absolutely essential at this point to stop the outbreak of waterborne diseases. Limited distribution of food for now, but importantly, getting the markets up and running. The debris is considerable. You know, we're estimating about 2.5 million tons of debris, which is 250,000 truckloads have to be removed. People have to be put back into their homes, and that means repairing over 10,000 homes, some of which would have to be entirely rebuilt. So the work is absolutely immense, and UNDP has started at least the emergency distributions, and we're progressively moving to fixing the water supply systems, fixing the housing so people can get back in, providing some income because people need money to get the markets operating and to buy food. So quite a lot of work to do.
Yes, and in the days, Titon, after the March 28, that massive 7.7 quake, we know that Western aid agencies say they struggle to gain access into Myanmar. Is that still the case at the moment?
I think it's how you define where the access is. So as I mentioned, in military-controlled areas so far and in the urban centres, there hasn't been any issues. The question is whether now that assistance can go across the line, so to speak, into the resistance-controlled areas, and that's not entirely clear. We're pushing very hard to make sure that happens.
Yes, and finally, the death toll stands at around 3,600, the latest that we know, 2 weeks on. Do you expect that to rise further as you know, the search and relief efforts continue, and also in the face of these aftershocks?
Unfortunately, about 3 or 4 days ago, probably 5 days ago, the search and rescue operation ceased. And it was essentially search and recovery. So those who were buried under the rubble were very unlikely to survive. So the numbers that we have now are numbers that have been recorded by the military authorities based on those who were missing and those bodies that they've recovered. So they are probably a reasonable estimation, but there are also people who are in non-government control, non-military controlled areas, and those numbers are not entirely clear. But I would suspect around 4,000 deaths, 4,000 too many, would probably be the number we're looking at.
Okay, we do wish you and your team all the best in your works in Myanmar. Thank you so much for your time today, Titon Mitram.
Thank you, and thank you for the Australian people for their support. Thank you very much.